So, I want to start by, well, first of all, let me go ahead and welcome everybody. Thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream edition of Mi Casa es Su Casa. I am, of course, your humble host, as always, Niko House. And today we're going to be covering the town hall that was held by CNN for Bernie Sanders. And if you're wondering, did they go out of their way to try and assassinate Bernie Sanders' character in every way, form, or fashion as usual? Of course they did. And we'll get to that. But he handled most of it famously. Now, before we get into the actual town hall itself, I do want to discuss a little bit of what happened beforehand. I'm not sure if anyone caught that exchange before the town hall had officially started, but it featured Rick Santorum and a couple of other people, and it was just obscene. It was one of the questions that they asked. It was like, well, do you think, I think they asked this, I can't remember if it was asked to Rick Santorum or the other guest, who clearly was the only one on the entire panel that had sense. But the host asked, well, there are a lot of women who went to that booth and they voted for Bernie Sanders because they thought, I can always vote for a woman next time. So it's fine if I don't vote for a woman this time. Do you think that women will be, willing to make that same choice like they were? And so I was like, oh my God, they actually think that's why people didn't vote for Bernie or for Hillary Clinton. They legitimately believe that women thought to themselves and said, I can vote for a woman next time. It's cool if I vote for Bernie Sanders this time. Literally no one I've ever talked to who voted for Bernie Sanders thought that way. Nobody. Not a single person. Most people that I know, like, there is a very, very small sector of society that voted for Hillary just because she was a woman. But most women that I know, they either didn't know about Bernie because of the suppression in the media, or they voted for Bernie. Like, that was basically it. I met maybe 2 women in my entire life that, like, hardcore didn't like Bernie Sanders and then voted for Hillary Clinton because they preferred her legitimately. Most people just didn't know. It's women too. Most people just, because it's the same thing with a lot of black people in the early states. They just didn't know that Bernie Sanders existed yet. That was the only thing that stopped them from voting for him. Now, of course, they're likely to vote for him. But that was just one example of the questions that they were asking these panelists. And I'm just like, are they serious right now? Is this a real panel trying to have a real discussion about what it looks like is going to be their real nominee? They also made a suggestion or a big deal about the fact that Bernie had like 12,000 Republicans donate to his campaign. And somehow, some way, they managed to turn that into a negative. And they were just so surprised at this phenomena. I didn't really get it at. I was like, what are they trying to say? And they were like, what does that mean, though? What does it mean if Bernie is attracting Republicans to his campaign? Well, what does that mean? And somehow it turned into these Republicans are really excited about Bernie Sanders. But this isn't a phenomena. This isn't an anomaly. This is exactly what we saw last election. In fact, if you look at the dominantly Republican rural areas in a lot of the states that Bernie Sanders won, they almost always went to Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary election. So it shouldn't be surprising for us to see that phenomenon continuing in this election as well. But no. That's not what they did. They said something complete. You know what? These Republicans are just really they feel really disenfranchised by Donald Trump. They feel like he's not representing their interests. And, therefore, out of all the Democratic candidates they could donate to, they donated to Bernie Sanders because they felt like Trump couldn't represent their interests. That doesn't really make any sense. That is the logical fallacy from hell. So, like, for them to go out of their way to make it seem like that even the victories of Bernie Sanders are just slights against Trump shows you exactly why I despise when people say, oh, Bernie Sanders is a sheep herder for the Democratic Party. He is not. That is not how you treat your sheep herders. Once again, do you know how you treat your sheep herders? You treat them like you treat Elizabeth Warren. You treat them like you treat Cory Booker. And of course, you absolutely treat them how you treat Kamala Harris. Those are sheep herders. More specifically and most specifically, the Elizabeth Warrens of the world, the Barbara Lees of the world, who pretend to be on our side, but only when it's convenient for their careers, okay? So he's not a sheep herder. He's not always right, but he is not a sheep herder. You don't treat, the Democratic Party would not allow them to, they would always make excuses for Bernie if he was a sheep herder. They don't do that. They make excuses for Warren. They elevate Warren because she is a sheep herder. She pretends to wag her finger at everybody who you know, all the corporations and all that good stuff, but then she votes for the military-industrial complex. She asks for Trump to pursue his coup in Venezuela, call Maduro a dictator, call Assad a dictator, voted for every military bill, like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have to go down the list, and she takes corporate money, obviously. So he's not a sheep herder. Like, and on top of that, it also lets you know they haven't learned anything, right? They haven't learned their lesson yet. But hey, you know what they say? If they're not talking about you at all, even if they're talking bad, that means you're doing something right. If they're not talking about you at all, then you're doing something wrong. So, first of all, they opened up the debate, right? And, okay, this is a CNN town hall, right? So I'm sure they were like vetting the hell out of people for this town hall meeting. I know that. Which makes it even funnier that when Bernie Sanders walks in, and there were a total of what, 3? So I know Amy Klobuchar had one, and Kamala Harris. He stands up, walks in, and the crowd, Bernie, Bernie, Bernie. Man, look. When I tell you that I wasn't expecting that, and it wasn't because I don't think that Bernie Sanders is not popular. It wasn't because I don't think he's popular. I know he's popular, but I do know that, and I'm pretty sure you do as well if you were watching, they vet questions. They vet the people who are asking the questions. They match up the question about Venezuela with the with the Latina lady. You know, they made sure when he asked a question about sexual harassment, it was asked by a woman. And then Blitz had answers and rebuttals to questions that hadn't even been asked yet, and he was looking at his paper to figure out what rebuttal he was going to say. So like, they vet pretty well when you have these type of town halls, but it didn't matter because no matter who you vet, no matter if they're Democrat or Republican, no matter if they're independent or otherwise, they still cheer Bernie multiple times throughout that town hall meeting. That doesn't bode well. If you're the establishment and you're counting on Bernie Sanders to not be that successful, you just need to go ahead and get that all out of your head. It's not happening, right? You better hope that Tulsi isn't as successful as Bernie. If she even has 3/4 of the success that Bernie has, then you have a 12-year problem on your hands. You don't only have a 8-year or a 4-year problem. You have a 12-year problem that could very well disrupt the establishment on both sides, because both Bernie and Tulsi appeal to both sides of the fence, like the host of that panel before the debate or the town hall started had alluded to. So that type of popularity going into a town hall was great to see. But then, of course, the first thing that they start doing is basically ad hominem attacks, right? Remember when they first came out and she said, how you're an independent. Why are you running for the Democratic Party? How are you going to be able to get the Democrats to rally behind you? How are you going to defeat Trump? I'm just like, he's an independent running in the Democratic primary. And you know what? All of that is totally inconsequential because the country, it's weird how people don't say, how are you going to win over independents in order to defeat the Republican candidate, whoever that may be? I'm pretty sure they're not running anybody against Trump. Why don't they ask that question? Considering the majority of the country is independent. So maybe y'all should be asking how people can move further right or left or to the center or whatever to appeal to the Bernie people, right, to the independents, rather than asking how Bernie should be moving more to the neoliberal side because that side isn't working. Greg, the question about reparations, yeah, it's irritating. I've addressed it, and I don't agree with them, but that's a different conversation for a different video. So basically, when you have the questions being tailored as such to attack, it's ad hominem. It's still an ad hominem attack. It's basically saying you're not an independent. So how do we know you can win a Democratic nomination? That's silly. But they did ask a really legitimate question: how are you going to stop them from cheating again? Which he actually did not address. But I mean, he did, but he didn't. Right? He talked about the upswell of support for his campaign. It looks a lot different. He has much more of an advantage than he did last time. Clearly, that's why they're going out of their way to attack him from the beginning instead of ignoring him like they tried to before. And so he did a good job dealing with that. Now, I want to address the sexual harassment question. And I want to just go on the record for saying this. I don't know all the details about the sexual harassment case. And I'm not saying that sexual harassment didn't happen during the course of the campaign. I wasn't in every place at once. But the fact that they keep trying to attach this sexual harassment case with Bernie Sanders is disgusting. It's disingenuous. And in all honesty, it's an insult to people who have had to deal with sexual harassment and have actually had their leaders or their employers or whoever actually just totally ignore them, right? Not even acknowledge the sexual harassment. And you know how we know this has happened? Because remember, Hillary Clinton, one of her lead people in her campaign, got in trouble for sexual assault. One of her lead people. Hillary didn't even so much as apologize. But it was worse because she hired him after she knew he was in trouble for said sexual assault patterns. Not once, but patterns. But nobody asked, as a woman, how could you allow these sexual assault allegations to go uninvestigated? You didn't even try. You didn't even let the rest of your staff know, hey, this guy's potentially a predator. Maybe you should separate yourself from him until we get down to the bottom of it. None of that. They didn't ask Hillary that. Or, Hillary, how did you let your husband, why did you and your husband bully Monica Lewinsky because of what took place with your husband, instead of being a good example, telling the rest of the world it wasn't her. It wasn't her fault. She did what she did because at the behest and of the powerful, of the elite. That's what happens. She made a mistake, but she shouldn't be punished for it. But what did you do? You doubled down on attacking this young lady. Well, when she was young. She was 29, 28, something like that. That's young. When you're talking about politics, political years, that's mad young. And she doubled down on that. But nobody ever asked her about that in these town hall discussions. Isn't that interesting? Like, the question about the sexual harassment was so weird because of the way it was phrased. It was like there's so many women and there are so many people of color and there are so many marginalized people now voting in the Democratic Party and have become part of the Democratic Party and are in office. How do we know that we can trust you to represent our interests in the Democratic Party because of that sexual harassment that happened in your last campaign? What? What does that even mean? How did you even connect those together? It was a planted question, right? Clearly it was. And then for Wolf Blitzer to keep pushing back on that question. There's nothing that Bernie Sanders personally could have done in that very moment that young lady experienced sexual harassment. Why are we deflecting blame away from the person who did it? Why are we utilizing someone's legitimate victimhood for political gain? when those people really don't even care about her. It's clear, in my opinion. It's very clear they don't care about her. Because if they cared about her, they would care about the victims of Hillary Clinton's staffer. But they don't. They don't even talk about it. Interesting. Bernie's a better answer to the reparation question. Yeah, I just said that. I agree. 100%. And I'll address that because you're the second person who brought it up. So I'll address that. Later on in the video. But they clearly don't care. They don't. It's just it's sad when you see someone's legitimate traumatic experience get exploited in this type of way. So that pissed me off. So basically, the first quarter of the town hall, for those of you who are curious, can be mostly surmised as an attempted character assassination. That's what they tried to do. But Bernie did handle it for the most part brilliantly. He was very calm. He's very collected. Every time they tried to move away from policy, except for maybe once, and that was during the sexual harassment question. But even then, he talked about the policies that he would have moving forward involving sexual harassment training, which is great. First of all, I think there should have been sexual harassment training to begin with. I think that should be the norm in any work environment, and a campaign is indeed a work environment. So, the next question, I believe, is this is really important. They asked, how would he defeat Trump? I love this answer, actually. He didn't start Russiagating, if you know what I mean. Which, before his announcement, he had a habit of doing, right? He would kind of say Trump working with Putin and we need to monitor that. And I wasn't really feeling that because it wasn't true, as we later on found out, agreed on by both the Democrats and the Republicans of Senate Judiciary Committee. So, he goes on to say, we're going to focus on universal health care. We're going to focus on the working class. We're going to make sure that billionaires don't get tax breaks. We're going to, all the things that he normally talks about, the policies. He kept it issue-based. He didn't make it about quote-unquote defeating Trump, although he did assert things that Trump would do. Or he did assert things that Trump has done, I should say, that need to be that means he needs to be put out of office, right? A lot of the things that he has done, like bolstering ICE, for example, bombing Syria to straight rubble, launching missiles into Syria before an investigation that concluded that Assad was guilty of any chemical attack, and it turned out that Mad Dog Mattis said that there was no chemical attack. Rand Paul warned us in advance that there was no chemical attack as well. So he handled it famously. Did a fantastic job, but I think that was the question when they asked, well, no, that was a different question. I'll get to that. I'm going to get to that. That was funny. Well, I'll talk about it now. It was funny. It was too funny to pass up. I don't want to forget. So they asked him, how are you going to engage Donald Trump? Because it's hard to take a guy like that seriously, because that he'll just deflect, he'll gaslight, he'll throw out socialism, blah. Like, that's what he'll do. And he was like, well, first of all, I'm going to bring a lie detector. Man, look. When he said I was going to bring I'm going to bring a lie detector, I was weak out of my mind. Because Trump is a liar. And the only way that but the problem is that Bernie also thinks that bringing a lie detector will stop Trump from lying. Because let's be honest. Trump will look at that lie detector and say, yo, that lie detector is rigged. Nope. I don't trust lie detectors from the Democratic Party. Well, this is from the police department. Well, is it the police department that I employ? I need to do a background check on all the police officers before we even take this lie detector seriously. I mean, by the way, I tell the best truths. And everybody knows this already. I tell the best truths, the truths, if you will. And it's really insulting that you would even bring this lie list detector test. I call it a lie list because it detects less of my lies, because I do so many truths that there's no lie detector that would be able to really catch me in a lie, because my lies even sound like truths. That's what would happen, basically, if you try to bring a lie detector on stage. for this guy. So I was glad. I was happy the way he handled that. The entire Trump thing, he told the truth about Trump. Like, and if there's somebody saying don't critique Trump, then I'm not vibing with that. Because Trump is a maniac. I've actually been saying this for quite some time. I just believe that Hillary is also a maniac. People believe that if you believe that Hillary's a maniac or Trump is a maniac, you can't believe the other one's a maniac. I believe the difference between Trump and Hillary is that Hillary is one of the most pragmatic maniacs that we've ever seen in modern political history or in history at all. And that's what makes her uniquely special. So, moving on. Bernie gets asked about universal health care. And once again, fantastic job addressing it. Wolf Blitzer pushes back. What a surprise, right? How are we going to pay for it? Wolf, don't ask me that dumbass question. But then, no, he didn't ask that. But what was asked by Wolf is that he said, well, there are people on their work health insurance that are really happy with their plan. Actually, 70% says a Gallup poll. They're really happy with their work insurance plan. Like, happy compared to what? Right? Like, yeah, if I have health insurance at my job, I'm happy I got health insurance because everybody else is paying out the ass for health insurance premiums and deductibles and the costs, and then the health insurance doesn't really cost it. Like, did you hear that? Did you? If they like their health insurance where they're paying money and there isn't really better options out there, he left that part out. Are you going to force them off of the healthcare that they pay for into free healthcare? Well, how dare you, Bernie Sanders? You're clearly not a man of the people. Really? Look at, he's like, I think that, and when Bernie answered, he said, I think they like their health insurance, quote unquote, because they like their doctor, they like the hospital they visit, they like the they're going to have all that, but for free. What is the debate? They get to keep their doctors. What are you talking about? But now free. Now it's free. You hear the difference there? Ask those same people, do you like your health insurance or do you want all the benefits of your health insurance but for free? I'm pretty sure most of them would choose the latter. So he did a good job answering that question. But he also goes on to say that his Medicare for All bill has 100 co-sponsors at this point. Kind of weird. Didn't know that. That's great news. That means Medicare for All is gaining traction. Now, just as an interesting side note, there are a lot of people running for office right now. The only ones who have introduced serious legislation are Tulsi and Bernie. Whether it be Tulsi Gabbard's election justice legislation or her stop arming terrorists legislation, or Bernie Sanders with the Bezos Act and the Medicare for All legislation, both of them have been working during the little down period, if you will. No one I know likes expensive health insurance. I know the more expensive your health insurance is, the less it does. Actually, it's weird. That's how the health insurance works now. But yeah. So basically, oh man, I lost my train of thought. What are we talking about? Oh man, what are we talking about? Sorry, just health insurance. But yeah. So anyway, Tulsi and Bernie have been actually working during the midterms when everyone else was grandstanding, speaking from their high horse, sitting on top of their podium, wagging their finger at Kavanaugh. Bernie was getting 100 co-sponsors for revolutionary health insurance. Okay? Tulsi was getting co-sponsors along with Bernie and Ro Khanna to end United States finance war in Yemen. Tulsi was working. Bernie was working. What were these other candidates doing? Oh, I forgot. Kamala Harris is out here giving congressional medals to Aretha Franklin. Like she even knew who Aretha Franklin was until somebody in her consulting firm was like, hey, black people love Aretha Franklin. Make sure you give her a congressional medal. That's what Kamala Harris is doing. How is Kamala, in your estimation, supposed to persuade or dissuade a legislature when she's barely had any of the pragmatic relationships that, once again, both Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie Sanders have. You get what I'm saying? The part where he mentioned we have 100 co-sponsors stuck out to me more than the rest of that particular conversation regarding single payer healthcare, because it reminded me like, damn, man, this dude is going to be an actual legislative president. That is significant. Because there are some presidents who come from gubernatorial backgrounds. And when they come from gubernatorial backgrounds, all they know how to do is sign executive orders. Because that's oftentimes how you get things done at the state level. But you have someone from an actual legislative background who has a relationship on both sides of the house, both of them, both Tulsi and Bernie. Bernie a little bit longer, obviously, has worked with them, I know for a fact, and gotten bills passed or amendments passed with Republican signatures. So that's beautiful. Because we think about it. Barack had state legislative background. Didn't really do much when he got to the Senate. Who we had before that? Bush, governor. Before that, Bill Clinton, governor. Before that, it was Bush Sr., director of the CIA, and he did something else. I can't remember what he did. Or director of the FBI or CIA. One of the two. I think CIA. Was it FBI? No, CIA. Yeah, CIA. Before that, Reagan, governor, an actor. So like there's a long list. There's a long list of presidents. In the last half century, maybe one or two of them even has a legislative background, but it would only really be Bernie that has a legitimate history in the legislature and has cultivated those relationships. So that's a unique benefit for Bernie Sanders. And I'm glad that he mentioned the fact that he had 100 co-sponsors so far. That question, how to pay for the policies, answered it perfectly, right? How are we going to pay for policies? We're going to make sure that wealthy people pay what the hell they supposed to be paying. That's how. Like, we don't even have to raise taxes on y'all. If we just fix their taxes, we'll be good. I don't think that was really a hard answer. Then he goes on to call out Amazon. As you all know, he did pass the Bezos Act. And so when he goes on to call out Amazon, talking about the fact that they paid zero. They made like $4 or $5 billion in profit, paid zero in taxes. So that was good. So he says, yo, he actually called out the DNC. I forgot about that. Bernie Sanders basically says that it should be unsurprising to anybody and everybody that the DNC was not even-handed. Now that's an important statement because it means, in my opinion, that he acknowledges the DNC will not be playing fair. Now, if you watched this town hall, if you've watched a little bit more of his other interviews, including the initial interview that he did on ABC, I can't remember which one, but it was on one of the mainstreams the day he announced. He's been a little bit more snarky lately. He's been a little bit more like on the attack. Whenever they said, well, what do you say to people who blame you for Donald Trump and say you didn't help Hillary enough? He's not playing that anymore. He's like, no. I worked my ass off for her. She was unelectable. Well, he don't say she was unelectable, but he's like, I did whatever I could. And he did. Much to our dismay, he really did. It sucked. I hated watching it for damn near 3 months or 4 months, however long it was. It broke my heart. The man that could fill a stadium with 25,000 people all of a sudden couldn't bring 50 people for Hillary Clinton because nobody wanted to see Hillary Clinton. That's Hillary Clinton's fault. But he makes sure to let everybody know in case somebody tries to push that narrative that Bernie didn't do enough. It needs to be very clear. And I'm not saying this as a compliment. Bernie did everything he freaking could to help Hillary Clinton be president. We hated every single minute of it, but he's not lying. He did everything he could. Next topic. All right. I like how he also goes on to talk about the fact that when they try to basically corner him into the Democratic Party, which they always do, he goes on to actually talk about the fact, he's like, I think that America is disenchanted, specifically young people, with both the Democratic and the Republican parties. That many people are independent and that people are voting for the issues and nothing more. And that can't really be stressed enough. And the fact that young people specifically are disenchanted with the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, it speaks volumes as to why Bernie is so confident in his ability to win this election. Because who was his dominant voter bloc? Millennials. Who oftentimes don't get asked on these polls that come out? Millennials. And even still, recently, all the polls that have come out, the only one close to him like that is actually in the race right now is Kamala. And now she is back by like 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 points depending on the poll. There's no one even close to the guy. And that's how a lot of those people are in the Democratic Party. Most of the time they don't ask independents unless they're doing a specific poll about independence. So not only have we been disenchanted with the Democratic Party, but also the Republican Party. I think that should be made perfectly clear. Anyone telling you to quote unquote walk away, that is a astroturfed movement to get people into the Republican Party. Just like quote unquote Brexit. Candace Owens is a tool. She's a tool. Like Straka, I believe his name was Brian Straka or Brandon Straka, whatever. He is a tool that was bought off. Those are the definitions of sheep herders. I want to be very clear about that. So, there are people disenchanted with both parties. That's what makes Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard very unique, because they're also obviously more than willing to disagree with both parties. They're a threat to both parties. Both of them are threats to both parties. And both of them are threats to the status quo. So I think that the majority of people know that, which is why Tulsi's it seems like the people who favor her most are the independents leaning one way or the other. Same thing with Bernie, but I think that the independents who like him lean more left, because most of the ones who lean more right tend to be libertarians, and they think that Bernie's crazy. Whatever. You got to be crazy to be a libertarian if you think that's ever worked ever in society. Let's move on. They go on to, I believe it was, I think it was Wolf maybe who asked the question. No, I think it was somebody in the crowd, and then Wolf asked him to elaborate. So they tried to bait Bernie into the socialism versus capitalism question. We knew that was coming. I was curious as to how he was going to answer, because I was kind of like, for me, usually when somebody has a question, because one of my jobs in politics when I've helped out other candidates is to rebut questions without dancing around them, but answering them directly. But you have to be able to answer them directly that won't give credence or even entertain the stupidity of a question like that. Like, what do you think about Trump saying that we'll never be a socialist country? Like, okay, so here's what we're going to talk about. And Bernie, killed it. Knocked it out of the park. I couldn't have answered it any better. He said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to give you universal health care. I don't care what Trump has to say. We're going to make sure that people can put their kids in daycare for free based on income or whatever. I don't care what Trump has to say. We're going to make sure that public colleges are free and are accessible. I don't care what Trump has to say about that. So basically going on to say, we are going to have these quote unquote socialist policies, because we already have socialism for the rich. So he don't want to hear about how we can't afford it. But he didn't use the words socialism or capitalism because it was indeed a trap. He said, nah, I'm not playing the game with you. What we're going to do is I'm going to do what's best for the people. Trump can kiss my ass. All 76 years of my white ass. That's basically what he said. And I'm perfectly fine with that. As a matter of fact, I was excited because I was like, damn. Because sometimes being the philosopher side of me wants to debate the differences of socialism and capitalism, da 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 da. Like, but the pragmatic side of me knows that what Bernie did was the best way to answer that question. Because he didn't get into a philosophical debate about what's better. He's like, no, we're going to talk about what's better for the people. We're going to talk about what we can do right now. Damn that the rhetoric, the fear mongering and the lies, quite honestly, that are being used by Trump in order to galvanize his I don't want to insult them, his base. I wasn't going to call them anything like stupid or anything like that, just his base. But he wanted to galvanize the people who haven't been to higher level education oftentimes, or if they have, they clearly did not take a philosophy class. Yeah, so he answered that question perfectly. Loved it. And he says basically that Trump's comments about socialism are totally irrelevant to Bernie's message. And it's true, they are. Now the fake news comment. Bernie talked about fake news and he made fun of Blitz, or Wolf Blitzer. And he said, that was a comment that he said, unlike Trump, I don't think that, the news is the enemy of the people. And he said, Trump thinks you're the enemy of the people. How the fuck to be the enemy of the people, Wolf? And I cracked up laughing. And when Wolf was about to answer, Bernie cut him off. And back to your question. Now, I will say this. I didn't like his answer that much. They are fake news. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, all of them are fake. They are literally propaganda tools. He should know this. And maybe he knows better than they, kind of bite the hand that is feeding him at the moment. I wouldn't say they're feeding him. More like they're dangling a carrot in front of his face, asking him to come on so they can berate him with ridiculous questions. But he's getting television time that he can use to then talk about the issues, and he's been doing a good job of that. But with that being said, the reason, you have to understand something. They always try to attribute this identity of the mainstream media being fake news to Donald Trump. And being someone who was around when that term was created and really assigned to fake news, to mainstream media, it's really irritating to me. Because that wasn't who coined that phrase. It was actually progressives who were calling out CNN and MSNBC because they were producing literal fake news. Trump then later co-opted it, and the right co-opted it to make it seem. And so then CNN and MSNBC, before they never talked about quote unquote fake news, but then as the right began to co-opt it, it made it easier for CNN and MSNBC to say, oh, that's just a tactic of the right. That's just a strategy of the right to discount anything that the mainstream says or that CNN says. But that was never the case. It was never the case. That started when so they started attributing the term fake news when Trump said it in a way to basically muddy the waters there in the very same way they did the Seth Rich situation, right? They try to make Seth Rich seem like a right-wing conspiracy, but the only reason that people were even interested in his death was because progressives were curious as to why a case like this was being totally swept under the rug. It was never a right-wing conspiracy. So, and they do that. They do that a lot. That's why I hate whenever Trump agrees with us sometimes. This is good. But he did go on to pivot. He did, and when with the news question, he said, "Look, these people are gonna say what they want to say. Trump's gonna say what he wants to say. But here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go into the living room of everybody, including the people in Trump country, and I'm gonna listen to them, and I'm gonna tell them what I have to say, and I'm gonna tell them the truth. And I think that people will wake up to realize that Trump is indeed an enemy. He's not their friend, and that we're here for the people. So he's going to go from obviously living room to living room, person to person, which he does. He's not going to start now. He's been doing this. He was in West Virginia. Okay, West Virginia is not a Democratic state. Okay, but he was there. So he finished it off well. I didn't like him. I won't say caping for the mainstream, but being complimentary or even sounding like he was defending the same people who smear him not just today, but smear him right before the town hall started. Like, come on. So, this question, I want to do this one and then the reparations question, and then I want to close out. I think those are the most important pieces. I did a video yesterday. Well, first of all, let me say this. No, I'm gonna say the video first. So I did a video yesterday. A lot of you may have seen it. It was talking about Bernie Sanders' interview on MSNBC. Matter of fact, I need to check my text message real quick. I know this is gonna sound funny, but it's important I check my text message before I say this. Okay, that's what I thought. So I did a video yesterday addressing Bernie Sanders' comments on Venezuela. And that video wasn't attacking him, but I just made him a little aware of the fact that his foreign policy advisor may not be as credible as he may be pretending to be. I don't know if it's on purpose. I don't know if it's on accident. I don't know if he's being nefarious. I don't know any of that. I did know, however, that his foreign policy advisor was steering him wrong on Venezuela. So I made it known in the video. And I showed the proof that there have been free and fair elections in Venezuela. Now, he did say that they should be free and fair, and that he would like to see a re-election where the international community was watching, which I don't think Maduro would actually object to that. He just doesn't want the United States to be watching. But I made sure to discuss the fact that Maduro is not a dictator. I also said, I talked substantially about U.S. intervention with foreign aid, about the fact that every time we are the leading givers of foreign aid to any particular country that is in turmoil or in the middle of a civil war, it always gets overthrown. It's a tactic that we've used. Elliot Abrams is hired to do this in South America. That is exactly why Trump brought in Elliot Abrams. Notice two things that Bernie Sanders did in that question. And I didn't hear it the first time. I thought I heard it, but I was like, nah. You notice Bernie's been calling Maduro a dictator basically forever. Basically since this conversation has started. Tonight, they asked him. He refused to call Maduro a dictator. And they said, Wolf was like, you stopped short of calling him a dictator. He said, we can't call him a dictator. He's not a dictator. He then, when pushed back again, he was like, hold on, what do you mean he's not a dictator? He said, I believe it's fair to ask for internationally observed fair elections, but there are democratic mechanisms in that government. All the power does not reside in Maduro's office. So it is not fair to call him a dictator. I'm not saying Bernie watches Mikasa Sukasa with Niko House. I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying he also answered the United States interventions question correctly. He didn't get too heavy on us. But he said this. Remember, it was he must allow the United States to send aid. We must allow the United States to send humanitarian aid. He was saying that until tonight. He said, I believe that the international community should be able to give aid. I think the international community should assist with Venezuela. However, what Trump is doing, also, by the way, funny enough, in my video, go check it out after this. Go check it out. Seriously. He said, it's interesting that Trump cares about Maduro's government, but he isn't worried about that quote-unquote election in Saudi Arabia. And they cut him off so fast. Next question, please. I'm not saying Bernie Sanders watches the MCSC network. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, appreciate you, Bernie. I'm glad you listen. I'm happy. It wasn't the perfect. Don't get it twisted. It wasn't the perfect answer, and hopefully, as time goes on, there'll be more of an opening for us to have a further discussion about it. But anybody who watched that video yesterday in the Snapchat, the super chat, will tell you those talking points. They're all there. So Bernie's paying attention now. He's listening. And one of the biggest complaints that I had about Bernie was that, man, he can be hard-headed sometimes, but when he listens and he sits down and he actually internalizes what's being said to him, he will adjust. And look what happened. He is learning. He's pushing back a little bit more. He's not allowing the DNC to control their narrative or his narrative. He's not allowing the people to control his narrative. Like I said, he wasn't perfect. He's not a foreign policy expert. He is a domestic policy and economics expert. So when he noticed that, anybody who's been paying attention can tell you he's called Maduro a dictator in every single interview. He was asked about Maduro, even when he was saying don't overthrow him. Tonight was the first night. Not only did he say refused to say he was a dictator, and then when they pushed back, he still said no, he is not a dictator. It's not fair to call him one. We should have free and fair elections. Even though I believe they were free and fair, the statistics say they were free and fair. However, I don't have a problem with you calling for free and fair elections. That's kind of like a truism, right? We should automatically assume that we should be advocating for free and fair elections. But when he said there are democratic mechanisms, we can't call him a dictator, I was like, oh, snaps, he is actually listening. He is actually listening. It was beautiful to hear. It honestly was. It lets me know that the progressive movement is not as disconnected from the tops of the movement to the bottoms of the movement as some people like to think. It's awesome. Once again, not the perfect answer. I'm a pragmatic person, though. That lets me know he's moving in the right direction. I'm sure Tulsi's had some influence in that regard, too. So, glad to hear that. It was amazing to hear. Now, Bernie Sanders' reparations answer? I don't like it. You can't... I know you're not the one who advocates for reparations to Israel, but at that point, you didn't advocate for it, and it's not your fault, but the truth of the matter is, we've already given billions to Israel because of what happened in the Holocaust. In addition to what Germany has given Israel and the Jewish community in the state of Germany. Or in the country of Germany. You can't have that happen, and then when black people make the same request, well, look, this is what y'all did for them. We lived here. Y'all were the reason that and it didn't even end. It was slavery. Okay, slavery happened, and then y'all started burning down all of anytime our economy became good in a given state or city, y'all burned it down. The government sanctioned a lot of the Wilmington Massacre, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Rosewood, Florida, Berkeley, California, Chicago. There was so many examples of this. So, and then Jim Crow happened, and redlining didn't even really, it officially ended late 70s. It was still practiced heavily all the way through the 80s and didn't really end into the 90s. But by that time, didn't matter because we're dealing with gentrification now because of the results of redlining. That's what makes these black communities so easily to take over. So you can't say, no. You could have even said, you know what? If this is something that my constituents want, I'll make a motion to introduce this legislation onto the floor. And we will have a serious debate about it. And have a serious discussion. We'll let the people who represent the various communities within the black community, the various philosophers and thinkers, the various academics, all come in and make their case, and we'll let the Senate and the House vote on it. I am personally for it, and if the House and the Senate vote yes on it, then you will have 100% my approval and signature. Like, that is not a difficult thing to say, in my opinion. I get that you may think it's a divisive issue, but saying I will hear the debates, I will hear the economics behind it, I will hear the reasons why, I will look at all the numbers, I will have legislation prepared, we will have a discussion on it within the legislature, and we will let the legislature ultimately decide, and what they decide to push as far as reparations are concerned, if I believe it actually benefits and mirrors what you are asking it to mirror, then I will sign it. It's not that difficult. Really is it? Not in my opinion. So, once again, reparations leave much to be desired. The question or the answer on reparations. However, now here's a caveat to that. Outside of a Bernie Sanders presidency, understand this. If there ever was a time for us to get reparations passed, not only for us, but same thing for Native Americans. Native Americans are actually going to have someone in office who cares about them if Bernie or Tulsi wins. Like, that's the first time in almost ever that's ever happened. Like Killer Mike said, although Bernie Sanders' answer for reparations leaves much to be desired, he is the only one with the exact same agenda as Martin Luther King, which was a poor people's campaign, anti-imperialism, and uplifting the black community in other ways, or passing policies that uplift the black community in other ways. We have to remember something. Some people set the path. Other people are meant to travel that beaten path that person created, so that we can open up these conversations to have better, more substantive dialogue. Bernie Sanders is kind of on that path, right? He doesn't get the reparations thing 100% right. However, with that being said, I know for a fact, you can check me on this one, Bernie Sanders was and is the reason that race is even discussed right now in the Democratic Party. That was political suicide before Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign, where he brought race to the forefront because the elites in the Democratic Party wanted to act like they were colorblind. We're all equal. What are you talking about? We don't even think about race. Bernie was like, nah, we have to address the military or the prison industrial complex. We have to address the racial income inequality amongst the black community versus their white counterparts, because we know that systemic racism is real. He stood in front of me in Fort Sumter, South Carolina, with a crowd full of white people. I was the only chocolate chip in the crowd, and I looked at him crazy when he said it. I cheered, and then I sat back down real quick because I realized, oh shit, bro, you trying to get us killed. We are in Fort Sumter, South Carolina, and this man looks at the crowd and says, if you don't believe that systemic racism is real, then you need to wake up. I was like, oh my God, the Klan is listening to you right now, and I'm going to be their target, because ain't no way in hell they getting away with lynching the old white guy, and they going to come to me, and they going to be like, he said it, we heard him said it, I got the tattoos and everything. So, yeah, I don't like his answer to reparations. But if there was ever a chance for us to even have the debate about reparations, if there was ever a president who would sign a reparations bill that we push, that the people pushed our Congress people to push for, because that, in my opinion, is now our business. If Bernie doesn't push it, fine. I know he'll sign it. He won't advocate against it either. So that opens up the door for us to have a debate. Bring it to CNN, bring it to independent media, bring it to YouTube, and bring it to CNN, bring it to MSNBC, bring it to the forefront, force our black leaders to start discussing it more. Once that happens, because the Democratic Party has played into these identity politics so much, the legitimate questions will start being introduced. Period. Reparations actually are not that expensive. I think the estimate for it would be like 20 trillion over the course of I don't know how many years. That's not that bad, actually. With inflation, we should probably be getting roughly 120 trillion, to be honest with you. But that's neither here nor there. The fact of the matter is, we have had enough. We're 13% of the population. We've had enough money to give. Damn near. Oh my God, their economy is reliant on us. Israel's entire economy is basically reliant on the aid that we give. So let's be very clear. It's possible. It's something that should be discussed because we've already seen it in action. It's only in issues that deal, for whatever reason, with black people specifically, that everything is a divisive issue. It's really weird. But we cannot allow that to be the narrative. Oh, it's divisive. Oh, it's divisive. Oh, it's not a divisive issue. It's a divisive issue because maybe, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but like, do you notice something? How many debates do you think they had to have in Germany about giving reparations to Jewish people? How many debates do you think they had about that? How many arguments do you think they had about that, in Germany? You think that's a legitimate argument? Yeah, by the fringe. But that's because Germany actually teaches what the Holocaust was. They don't sugarcoat it. They accept blame for it. They say that we failed the Jewish community. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Everybody has some share of responsibility, and that is why we owe these reparations. And because of this education, there is no debate about whether or not there are reparations owed by Germany to the Jewish community. We do not have that type of education here. There are people in the education system in the South that believe that the Civil War had nothing to do with slavery. There are people who believe that. Taj Marie, that's why we need Marianne Williams on the debate stage. I 100% agree. Man, that woman is soulful. That woman is, oh man, I get the best vibes from her ever. She is an incredible person. But like I said, I think that if our education system was fixed, then the conversation about reparations wouldn't be an issue. In fact, there would be people calling for very similar to what we're seeing now, but the problem is people who are generally for reparations have all gone to higher education, so they know the truth about slavery and all the residual effects of slavery. The people who do not pursue higher education are not given proper education because we're the worst education systems, coincidentally enough, in the same place that there was slavery for the most part. So I don't think that's a surprise. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think they go hand in hand. So once we fix our education system, or at least we address it, then I think that there'll be a more serious conversation about reparations. But for the time being, there should be a grassroots movement for reparations. And by the way, I don't even know that I would qualify for reparations. So if anybody thinks that I would get it, you're mistaken. I am, on my mother's side, we're like Barbadians. So like, I think the farthest it goes back for me is my great-great-grandmother. So if they allow like 3 generations to be the distinction for if you qualify for reparations, which would go around the time that redlining officially ended, roughly, then yeah, I guess then we would be good. But other than that, I doubt I would get reparations. So I'm just saying, because I believe that the Jewish community in Germany deserve reparations from Germany. I believe that the Native American community in the United States deserves more reparations. I feel like they haven't been given enough. And I think that there were basically some of the things that they were given were just to keep them out of civilized society, civilized, if you will. They didn't want them integrated because then you could take advantage of the Native Americans if they're not integrated in society. They don't have as much political power. So just me being consistent with my values and my ethos, of course I believe black people should, especially because I know my history. The Holocaust ended in the 40s? Native American plight is ongoing. Black redlining, the last legislative racist law didn't officially end until the late 70s, didn't stop stopped persisting into the late 80s, really the early 90s. And we're still feeling it. That's why gentrification was allowed to take place. Because we never were allowed to accrue the type of wealth that would allow us to combat gentrification. So that's how I feel about reparations, and I feel about Bernie. But overall, I'll give it about an A-. I'll give it an A-. I think that he did a fantastic job. He was definitely more snarky, definitely a little bit more snappy. The Venezuela question, you go from being a D- to a C+. Well, I'll give you a B-. We'll go with a B- for the Venezuela question. Because when you go out of your way to say Maduro isn't a dictator, because you know that if you say that, you now give ammo to the neoconservatives to overthrow him. So, and then when you say international aid specifically, not United States-led aid, and then you go out of your way to cap that off with the Vietnam answer, or the Vietnam reference at the end of that answer, spot on. Beautiful. So you get a B- for that question. Overall, did a fantastic job. I really can't complain. Before I go, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Subscribe if this is your first time listening to us. We give news and analysis every single day. A lot of times, multiple videos a day. Go check out that Venezuela video and let me know in the comment section on this video or that video if you think that Bernie got his answer from us. We may think so, but I would love to know what you think. Make sure if you're subscribed that you hit that notification bell. Hit it. Hit it now. Matter of fact, while we're live, hit that notification bell right now so that you know whenever we post a video, whenever we post on our community tab, whenever we go live. And then finally, go to our Patreon. Help the network grow. We are now at 166 Patreon subscribers. We have 166 patrons. You can we're trying to reach our goal of 500. You can help us reach that goal by going to the Patreon. You can donate $1, people. $1. You won't even notice your dollar is gone unless you are a frequenter of double cheeseburgers. Well, McDoubles. Can't be a double cheeseburger anymore. That's $1.69. So you can be part of this huge revolution that we are putting together in independent media. And anybody who's followed, you can tell us we are the fringe of the fringe, right? So where there's independent media and there's like leftist independent media, we're the real left. There's the new left, there's a new left, and there's a real left. We're the real left. In other words, we believe in true liberation of the people. We believe in true liberation of ourselves as far as economic liberation, a liberation that will allow you to persist opportunity by being healthy, right? Being happy, being able to take care of yourself, mental health care. But we're also we're bringers of truth and we're bringers of facts. Even if those facts may be inconvenient, unfortunately, to our agenda, if you will. And so you can donate to our Patreon for as little as $1. Anything helps. We're trying to reach our goal of 500. So help us reach that goal. Click on the link in the description below. Subscribe if you have not. Hit the notification bell. And hey, more than anything else, always remember, find your balance. Peace.